Mike McConville here for String Tech Workstations. Before I start into this guitar, a 1967 ES 125, I wanted to go over a few things before I adjust. I have not touched this guitar yet. So I'm going to point out a few things that immediately draw my attention and let you know how I proceed to get this guitar right up to snuff. Okay, so first thing, I'm holding that first string down on the last fret. So that's as close as the string will ever get to the pickups. You see how those pole pieces have been raised? This is way too close to the string. This is close enough for that magnetism to disrupt the intonation and the tuning. Okay, secondly, I have this sort of selection of straight edges. I think I mentioned in previous videos, I pick up a 1 meter long stick and then cut it into multiple straight edges to use for fretwork. Okay, thirdly, when I put that straight edge at the neck to body junction, right away it's apparent that we have that high spot. The problem with this is we cannot drop the action down to where it needs to be until the fret issues are addressed. Okay, next. There's fret wear in those frets. Those crowns are not fretting dead center. This is going to need a fret dress full length. So we will be installing a compensated nut on this one as well. And this will be set up for 10 to 46 strings at concert pitch. Next step, you can see the fret wear in those frets. That's certainly enough to not only cause buzzing, but it will also affect the intonation and the tuning. Another note for vintage instruments like this, you look at the side of the neck here, you can see all of that lacquer has crazed. We need to move with extreme caution when using any type of tape around this lacquer. This is actually a low-tack painter's tape that I use on the vintage instruments so that there's no chance of pulling any lacquer off when you remove that tape. This is actually a replacement tailpiece, and it's not causing any issues. It's sitting nice and high up off of the body, so there's not going to be any issues with marring the top of the guitar or any extraneous buzzing. Now I have removed the truss rod cover and exposed that nut, and I can see right away that this actually has no tension on it at all. So I'm going to just snug that to the point where it has some tension, enough that it doesn't rattle. And then we need to check again to see if there's any issues with this. And we have a little bit of a back bow at this point in the neck. So this kind of complicates things a little bit. After removing the truss rod, I could see that this nut has absolutely no tension on it at all. Now we need to check again. And even without any string tension, this is some extra trouble here. So we got a little bit of a back bow in that neck. Seems to be good on the treble side. We're going to need to spot dress this in a couple of different places. So we've got a little bit of a back bow on the bass side of that neck. Now I've heated that knife up on the buffer, and I am going to score across the bottom. Especially with this guitar being vintage and vintage lacquer, you can see the lacquer is crazed right to the edge of that nut. Special consideration when working on vintage instruments. We'll just score that and score the bottom. I'm even going to score along here once or twice some relief cuts in the lacquer. So we managed to get that nut out safely without chipping any lacquer. We got it out right on the glue line, and now we're ready to do our fret dress. I wanted to give you a close-up again of that checked lacquer. So we came right to the edge of the nut slot without chipping off any of that very delicate vintage lacquer. So we've done our sort of reconnaissance, and we're finding that, got a bit of clicking here, kind of stops right here. So like I did in previous videos, I'm going to successively smaller straight edges to kind of zero in the trouble spots. I'm really kind of doing this for your sake. I know where I've got to go, but I want to illustrate this for the videos. Next trouble spot's here. Now I'm going to go down to a smaller one. I'm going to zero right in on that. As always, it's the neck to body junction. It seems to be mostly on the bass side. There is a little bit of clicking here. Yeah, and it's the same spot right there at that neck to body junction that you've seen in so many other videos. So we're going to proceed now, and I'm going to sort of start and stop. I'm going to get those high spots, and then I'll zero in with the camera and kind of show you what we got. So we've taken care of all of the high spots. We'll now move on to recrowning. So we're going to get our straight edges again, and we're going to check that. No clicking now. Nope, 100%. Here at the body junction, no more clicking. Let's go to a smaller one. Any clicking? No, dead flat. Here, dead flat. There you go. No $100,000 CNC machines. This is all done by hand. You want multiple lengths of straight edges so that you can check various spots of the neck. So we've basically nailed all the high spots, but I do want to say something here. What really should be done, we have enough real estate on these frets that we can work with, but what will be done eventually, those frets would be removed, and then you need to actually put a half turn at least of load on the truss rod. With that load on the truss rod, you true up the neck, respecting the radius, of course. True up the neck, dead flat, laser straight, end to end. Then you put your new frets in. Right now, this neck, with no load on the truss rod, with the truss rod loosened off completely, it was still going in a very slight back bow on the base side from here to here, and that's what we just took care of. But when a refret is done properly and the fingerboard is corrected, when you release the load on that truss rod, once the refret and the neck has been corrected and everything has been done perfectly, then without any string tension on the guitar at all, when you release that load, the neck should come up into a little bit of relief. And that way, it puts you in the driver's seat as far as always being able to control the lay of the neck with any gauge of string and any tuning. You should never touch the center of the crown with the crowning file. You see I'm going from one side to the other, equal strokes on both sides of the frets. So we had to take quite a bit off on that bass side, and the issue was the actual lay of the neck and preparation of the fingerboard was not optimal for proper truss rod adjustment. This will need a refret at some point in the future, and at that time all of these lay of the neck issues will be put to rest forever. This was the worst part of the bass side where it was going in a back bow. See, the treble side up here is actually pretty good. Most of the treble was on the bass side. I want to give you kind of bird's eye view of this before I go any further. So what we've done is we leveled and recrowned. Now we're going to move it to the next stage. That 320 grit sandpaper will take out the tooling marks of the file. These faint ghost marks that you see in those frets, 90% of that is going to be gone when we're done. Here's our next step. Pine block, in this case like a flexible vinyl, but you could also use leather. We wrap the sandpaper 320 grit, and then we go along the length of the string path. So what happens is this block, because you've got that flexible material underneath the sandpaper distorts and slurs over top of the crown. So when I lean on the heel, I'm getting the near side of the fret. When I turn the block and ride on the toe and pull back, I'm getting the other side of the fret. So you're essentially scrubbing the fret back to center. And that's first pass with a 320, and that got rid of the lion's share of the file marks. Remember those indentations? There's still a couple of faint little ghost marks there. Well, you watch, as we work our way through here, those will disappear completely. No CNC machines, no dial calipers, no vices, no vice grips. Nope, it's all done right here on the tech deck. Very simple approach for what always seems to be such a complicated problem for the industry. Okay, we'll go through this next grit, and then I'll stop and show you the progress. Okay, here's our next stage. We've gone through a couple of fine grits of sandpaper, and now we'll get ready to buff it out. Final buff. So in summary, fret perfection. Okay, I've gone through the couple of first steps there with the compensated nut blank. We've got the overhang, we've ramped back that crown. We're just getting ready to trace the lines of the original nut onto the compensated nut blank. So we're concentrating more on the spacing at this point. So I've left lots of height on that crown. Don't cut yourself short on this. You want to have lots of room to play as you gradually hone these things down to their final depth. I got a 100% bird's eye view of what I'm doing here. We're just about getting ready to tune the guitar now, actually. It's getting pretty close. Now we can actually tune the guitar up to concert pitch. Now this is where we got to slow right down, because every stroke of the file brings you closer to the point of no return. Proceed with caution. You want to drop that bridge down to where it's going to be its final height. If not, if you file not too close and then you drop your bridge down, then you're going to have some buzzing and you'll be starting all over. I've smoothed out that crown, and that's sort of reduced the depth of the slot. Now we are talking a few thou here. This is literally a couple of strokes of the file and we're done. We're going to bring those screws down so that the magnets don't pull that string out of tune. These pickups can't be lowered. You can only adjust the screws, and they're way too high the way they are. Same idea with the neck pickup. We'll bring that down. Okay, the bridge has been intonated. Frets are level dressed, crown polished. The values have been kind of finalized for the compensated nut. We used our tuner to check the open string in the first fret notes all the way across. Perfectly in tune. Hallelujah, she's done. So now we can glue this thing into place. Now, I know Dan said they were a fresh set of strings. Well, you know something? They weren't fresh by the time I finished doing all my adjustments, that's for sure. Strings were just not meant to be tightened and loosened and tightened and loosened. This will be the second time, these brand new strings that I put on, this will be the second time that I've actually tuned them up to concert pitch. They'll be fine. This is another quick fix I did right at the end. I took the input jack out, put it back in, put a washer underneath that nut because there was no washer. Advice to your customers, for anyone that's doing this type of work: use a right angle jack on this type of guitar. There's already some major stress marks around that input jack. I've just seen those things bust through. Somebody sits down and kind of leans back, and you got that straight jack coming right out of that thin side, and it spells disaster. Right angle jack, real good idea. Mission accomplished. This 1967 125 is playing like a dream. Our frets. There's our compensated nut. And now the action is super slick. And it is perfectly in tune. Well, like I've illustrated so many times before on the Les Pauls, 335s, and any short scale guitar, even that J45 we just did, this is the real acid test, those first position chords. And what's D, first position. So these are kind of a wide oval, low profile fret, which was very common around that time. Because the jazz guys tend to slur as opposed to bending. So for slipping chords around, very, very nice feel. Congratulations to Peter Green in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Your next surgery jig is on the way. And also to the guys down in Nashville at Tour Supply. Another Tech Deck was shipped out today. That should be arriving midweek next week. Cheers.